Hey everyone, welcome to the RotoGrinders Morning Grind Podcast. I'm your host, Stevietpfl. It's Tuesday, it is February 18th. It is 2020. We're going to talk some NASCAR again today. We're going to kind of recap the Daytona 500 and start previewing the race, the Pennzoil 400 presented by Jiffy Lube over there at Las Vegas for this weekend. We do these preview recap shows each and every week. We are going to be doing them on Grinders Live this year on Wednesdays, but with the slow NBA All-Star break, we decided to go ahead and do the recap and preview show on the Morning Grind this week. So excited to talk some NASCAR. First and foremost, just want to say I am very, very thankful that Ryan Newman is alive. If you didn't watch the NASCAR race, if you don't watch NASCAR, it was one of the worst wrecks I've ever seen. I've been watching NASCAR. I've been watching racing in general my whole life. My dad, owned some dirt cars. I've been going to the racetrack for a very long time. So one of the worst wrecks I've ever seen. And yeah, just, really thankful that he is alive. We still don't know the injuries or anything along those lines. We do know that he was in serious condition last night, but it wasn't life-threatening. So we wait for news along those lines, and I think we're all, just giving kudos to the medical teams and the track medical team that was there, so fast and, just able to get to him, get the fires put out, get him out of the car safely. And kudos to NASCAR in general, just, as far as the equipment and the safety has come, it's come a long way. So kudos to them because the safety of these drivers are so important. I tweeted this out as well, and I said I watched that wreck happen. I was at the start finish line on the pit wall, saw it happen right in front of me. And any time like that, you want to hear good news, and the fact that we weren't hearing anything, the fact that they brought out like black tarps, and the fact that they said he was going straight to the hospital, I was down there to see. I was down there to see, if I could get any information, and I was just, man, it was so hard watching the crew members walk by. Just watching the crew members walk by, teary-eyed. Nobody's saying anything. The tarps, everything. It was just really hard to watch. It was really hard to watch that ambulance leave. All I could think about was his girls. So very happy that he is alive. And wish him a speedy recovery for sure. So, all right. If you never watched or listened, in this case, to a preview show, and you'll be able to watch this too. This will be on YouTube later. No screen shares or anything, so audio might be the best, so you don't have to see my ugly mug. But if you never watched the preview show before, like I said, we're moving it to Grinders Live this year. We go back and we look at what I played in cash games, what the major tournaments, winner, kind of break down the winning lineup from DraftKings and FanDuel, break down my cash lineups. We talk about the strategy. I give my takes on things that I thought were bad. I give out the good and just some takeaways to kind of just recap the race before, and then we, preview the upcoming track, what to look for statistically, and, just kind of talk a little bit about the upcoming race, and that's usually it. So appreciate you guys listening. We'll have a hockey podcast on Wednesday, so make sure you're checking that out. So let's go back. We're going to start over there on, DraftKings, with cash lineup. Cash for me has been very, very good at Daytona and Talladega for a long time. Just kind of playing it very safe. It did not help this week that BJ McLeod and Quinn Hoof and Reed Sorensen all decided they wanted to wreck running in the back. You play these guys because they're going to run around the back, kind of stay out of trouble. Quinn Hoof wrecked, finished 39th, scored 1 fantasy point. BJ McLeod and Reed Sorensen cut a tire. Like, BJ McLeod was in a wreck. It was not good. BJ McLeod and Quinn Hoof wrecking was one of the hardest things to watch for my DFS weekend. Ended up having a losing weekend. Can't win them all. I would do the same thing at Daytona next time we come back, or if I had to do it again, I'd do the same thing. It was, oh man, so hard to watch. Two of your guys that are going to ride around the back, wreck you, just being a wreck and just mess you all up. So there was a couple different decisions on how to approach cash games for me this week. We had, Blaney and Boyer and like Denny starting in the 20s. You could easily have played Boyer, Blaney. Kyle Busch was popular in cash games. Denny Hamlin was pretty popular in cash games as well. So there was a lot of different ways you could approach cash games over there on DraftKings this week. And, when you're looking back at it, like, I'm not mad about any of the decisions that I made. When I go back and I look at like my rankings and stuff, they were all really solid. It's just, you don't know what's going to happen. So like, I try to go really safe, and, Kyle Busch was like 66% owned and put up 7 fantasy points. So like, if my guys are not involved in that wreck, I'm probably fine. So I'm not, and like I said, I'm not like, oh, I got to do it differently next time. So that was the last thing that I thought. Now, had I known that there was going to be the Joe Gibbs like train sitting back for that first stage and just kind of setting themselves up to be out front, maybe I would have approached it differently. But yeah, nothing pre-race thoughts would have made me approach anything differently. Going over to DraftKings, they had the 888K, 888,000 America's race, 150K to first place, and there was 11 person tie for first place. Congratulations to everybody that took that down for 28K a piece. That's super solid. Had a lot of people reach out to me. Congratulations to you guys. The winning lineup over there was Ryan Blaney, Clint Boyer, Brendan Gaughan, Denny Hamlin, Corey LaJoie, and David Reagan. Scored 326.5 points. It took those guys starting in the back in the 20s, Blaney, Boyer, Hamlin, and played those guys. Brendan Gaughan started 39th, finished 7th, 32 place differential for 71 fantasy points. Corey LaJoie, 36 to 8th. He rode around in the back. David Reagan was involved in a little bit of a wreck, had some damage, but still was able to finish 4th and keep it going there. So all guys that I really liked. If you listen to the show on Saturday night, if you looked at rankings and stuff, I liked all these guys. All these guys were prime plays for me. I was looking at my ownership. I just didn't have the right combo. Like I was almost overweight on all those guys. So like looking at it, like Brendan Gaughan, I was overweight on Brendan Gaughan. Who are the other ones? Corey LaJoy, I was overweight on Corey LaJoy. I was way overweight on David Reagan. I had 20% more than the field on Reagan and Brendan Gaughan. So, like, Denny, I was actually underweight on Denny. I had played 27%, and he was 36.8%. So I was underweight on Denny. I was right at the field on Ryan Blaney. Both me and the field had 27%. Well, the field had 26%, I had 27%. And then Clint Boyer, I had 34% Clint. He was 32% owned. So, a little overweight on Clint. Very slightly overweight on Clint, very slightly overweight on Blaney, little underweight on Denny. Denny was the highest scoring driver. Denny was one of my favorite plays. And like, if you read the sports betting article, I told you to bet Denny Hamlin. He was one of my favorite bets. I think it was like plus 900 or something. So like, obviously I like Denny a lot. It's just, I ended up, we had him projected for 29%. I was trying to be right at the field on projected. He ended up coming in a lot higher. So yeah, and just kind of looking, here, looking at everything else, some shocking ownerships. I think, some things that, kind of shocked me was, Brad Keselowski wasn't as high as owned as I thought he was going to be. Kyle Busch was a lot higher owned than I thought he was going to be. Kevin Harvick was a lot higher owned than I thought he was going to be. Clint, he was higher owned than I thought, but I knew that there was a good chance that was going to be the case. For him, Kyle Larson ended up getting a lot of ownership that I didn't really expect. I was way underweight on Kyle Larson, for the big tournament anyway. So like those guys kind of shocked me as far as ownership goes. Brendan Gaughan was, I think, the biggest shocker to me, that he was a lot lower owned than I thought he was going to be. Like, we had him projected for 42%. I actually thought he was going to be more than that, and he came in at 27.6%. So I'm not saying that I wasn't mad about that one. Ross Chastain was another guy that was lower than I thought he was going to be. So yeah, Ty Dillon was a lot more than I thought he was going to be. I thought I was doubling the field on him, and I ended up being like 5% underweight on him. So, that one was kind of shocking. And then just kind of a lot of these guys towards the back, their ownerships were shocking. Like, so yeah. Yeah. Nothing else really to talk about there. Let's move over to FanDuel. FanDuel Cash as well did not do well. Luckily, he had some good tournament teams over there on FanDuel. So my FanDuel Cash lineup was Corey LaJoy, Brendan Gaughan, Reed Sorensen, Clint Boyer, Kyle Busch. Reed Sorensen having that tire go down and hit the wall. He was just riding, man. He was cruising his way to a top 20, and I think Cash would have been way different. When I was looking at double ups and stuff, I was like right below the bubble. So I think it would have been way different. Kyle Busch was still highly owned in Cash. It didn't matter. Clint Boyer obviously did really well. Gaughan did really well, and LaJoy did really well. So there was two like pretty obvious cash builds for me on FanDuel, and I went with the one that didn't cash. If I would have went with the other one, it would have cashed fine. But yeah, nothing else really to talk about here as far as cash games. Like, I think you could have went Denny Hamlin. He was pretty popular in cash. I think you could have went Ryan Blaney. That was the other build. You could go Blaney, Hamlin, Boyer. I think it was Kyle Busch and Brendan Gaughan, because Brendan Gaughan was like 2K. So like you could play all the studs if you wanted to, but like when I was looking at it, like I was playing Brendan Gaughan, LaJoy, and Sorensen pretty much no matter what on FanDuel in cash. So like it was just really deciding on like how else I wanted to approach it. So I ended up taking Boyer and Kyle Busch more because Boyer and Kyle Busch were starting 29th and 28th. They were the best back starters. And I seriously debated between Kyle Busch and Michael McDowell. So like that's just Daytona in a nutshell, right? Had some, had Master Yoshi and Alex Berg 22 both messaged me. Congratulations to you guys. There was one more person, Flag Hunter 21. There was a 3-way tie on FanDuel for the top prize over there in their 150K Intimidator, 25K to first. So congratulations to you guys taking down 13K apiece. The winning lineup over there was Brendan Gaughan, David Reagan, Denny Hamlin, Corey LaJoie, and Ryan Blaney. Really strong lineup, all guys that I really, really liked. Again, like all guys that I ranked pretty high, like David Reagan at 9.4%, was really kind of shocking to me when it came to FanDuel. Like I played 30% of that dude over there on FanDuel. Brendan Gaughan, 18.4%. I think I played like 34% of him. He was one of my highest owned drivers. Blaney, I played 35% Blaney. I played 35% Boyer. And then Hamlin, I played 31%. I was 7% under on Hamlin. So like the build that won, like I had a lot of those guys. It's just like, not the right combination. So happens, right? Like it happens. You have the right combinations. You're right on a lot of things. It just doesn't it just happens. So as far as ownership over there, nothing too crazy. Kyle Busch was really, really high owned. Again, like Kyle was the stud that was like really highly owned this weekend. So did not help a lot of people that his engine blew. Outside of that, projected ownership was really, really close over there on FanDuel. There wasn't too many things that were like super shocking. Jimmy was a lot higher on FanDuel than I thought he was going to be. We had him projected for like 6%. He ended up being like 13.4%. I had like 1%. So, Austin Dillon was another guy that was kind of higher owned than I thought, like 14% owned. Did not see that one coming. Yeah, some of these back markers were really low owned. John Hunter Nemechek was like 3% owned. Ty did not get the same type of ownership on FanDuel that he did on DraftKings. Brendan Gaughan at 2K or 2,500 or whatever it was only 18% owned in the big tournament. So if you played the back markers on FanDuel, like again, you're just like, oh man, Quinn Hoof was like 4%, BJ McLeod was like 3.3%, Timmy Hill was like 2%. You're like, oh, you guys had to wreck 4.5% for Reed Sorensen. Like, couldn't just ride around and not wreck. You had to have an issue. Obviously, they can't predict that stuff. So, I'd say for the most part, when we're looking back at like the winning lineup, the winning lineup did not have anyone start inside the top 20. So if you play the groups and stuff that we talked about, the strategy was sound, was ultrasound. So always glad to see, what we talk about as far as the strategy work. You have to, I'm not sitting here, and I've said this many times, like you're not going to sit here and say like you didn't get lucky. Daytona and Talladega, there's wrecks. We can't predict that, but you just play the strategy and you hope that at the end you have 6 guys there. And, congratulations to the guys that did. Man, like my bad. It's so hard, like to really have a bad for Daytona. Like, we'll talk more about this next week at Vegas, where maybe a fast car that we expected to be fast was actually really kind of slow in the get lucky. So, just kind of looking at it, like my bad would probably be Quinn Hoof kind of trying to come down in front of Eric Amarola, wrecking and, collecting like BJ McLeod and stuff. Like, it's probably my bad. those two guys were really criminally underowned for where they were starting and what they were going to do in the race. So like him just making the mistake of not just letting Eric Almirola go and wrecking, I think that's clear cut bad for me. The good, man, a couple goods, right? Like good that Ryan Newman's live. Good for Denny Hamlin winning his third, Daytona 500. Super pumped for him for that. I know. And just really quick, like if you didn't see this, like news, like if you were watching the race and you knew all about the Hamlin or the Newman stuff, and you saw Hamlin doing donuts in the grass and stuff, like he apologized. Joe Gibbs apologized. Like they apologized. They didn't know how bad everything was with Ryan Newman. So it's not his fault. Don't be that person. Don't be the person to blame LaJoy or Blaney. Like, don't be that person. So yeah, don't be that person. So yeah, like a lot of good, man. I was happy to see Brendan Gaughan do really well. He came on the podcast last week, so I was happy to see him do well. Happy to see like LaJoy do well. Happy to see like different cars up there in the top 10 and stuff. But like I always say, really happy for Denny, friend of RotoGrinders. Congratulations to him on his third Daytona 500. If you checked out the RotoGrinders story last week when we took over Media Day on Instagram, he talked about how cool it would be to win his third Daytona 500. So my takeaways, bring on Vegas, bring on races that like we can kind of predict where the fastest laps and stuff are going to come from. Kind of excited to see a few things. Like there's, definitely things that I'm looking forward to going into Vegas, looking at like what our rookies are going to do with their equipment. We're looking at, what to expect with the new Camaro. Chevy was the only team that like changed like a dramatic change from last year. So, just kind of excited to see, how those things are going to really affect everything. So, but yeah, like that, it's kind of like, again, like the Ryan Newman thing, just, going to continue to pray for him and just hope for a speedy recovery. Highly doubt that he's in the car this weekend. So will be interesting to see like if it's like Chase Briscoe or somebody, because these Vegas cars are ready already. Like, these cars are ready weeks ago. These Daytona 500 in Las Vegas and these West Coast cars are prepped long before. So it'll be interesting to see how all that plays out. But again, just really happy that Ryan Newman is alive and it's not life-threatening. And we'll just have to wait for more details as far as that. Life today is kind of a lot. It forces us to always be on, but every now and then it's important to just stop and crack open a mountain cold Coors Light and chill. So when you choose to turn off, choose the one beer that's made to chill. Coors Light, mountain cold refreshment made to chill. What do you do when you need a moment to chill? Me, I'm watching sports, maybe, watching the NASCAR race this past weekend, cracking open a Coors Light, enjoying the race. I'm definitely going to be doing that for Vegas this weekend, home, watching the race, cracking open. So excited, to be able to watch the race and crack open a Coors Light. So, if you're watching sports, you're enjoying your All-Star break, Coors Light, man, gotta take care of it. These days, everything is go, go, go. Nonstop hustle is taken over, and it's kind of a lot. There's work, there's friends, there's family, a million pressing social issues, and an expectation to always be on. If the pace of things is wearing you down, take a moment, pause, refresh yourself. You need a moment to turn off for a little bit. golfing, watching sports, however it may be. When you choose to turn off, reach for the one beer that's made to chill. Coors Light is brewed with a 3-step cold process, cold lager, cold filtered, and cold package, so it's actually made to chill. The mountains on Coors Light, cold activated bottles and cans turn blue when chilled to perfection. Born in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado in 1978, Coors Light refreshing, crisp, and only 102 calories. That's why Coors Light is the one I choose when I need a moment of chill. So when you want to reset, reach for the beer that's made to chill. Celebrate responsibly, and Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. We go to Las Vegas this weekend. Pennzoil 400 presented by Jiffy Lube. Las Vegas is a 1.5-mile oval. It's a steep track. Steep tracks that you can kind of compare to Vegas. Bristol, Dover, Homestead, and Darlington are all your steep tracks. So if you're, kind of looking at data from last year, because it's hard to look at data before last year because, the package and the rule changes, we saw a huge difference. So if you're grouping all your steep tracks together to try to get an idea of what you're looking at, you got Bristol, Dover, Homestead, Darlington. The stages this weekend are 80, 80, and 107. Fuel mileage is 58 to 62 laps, so they will have to pit under green. Dominator points for DraftKings, we're going to have 133.5 fastest lap points and 66.75 laps led points. A lot of Dominator points available here this weekend with 267 laps. On FanDuel, we have 26.7 laps led points and 26.7 laps completed points. Tire wear, not really going to be an issue here at Vegas. The last 10 races averages 6.7 cautions per race for an average of 29.6 laps, which is taking away 14.8 of those DK Dominator points that we just talked about because you can't get fastest laps under caution. Last year, we had 4 cautions and 2 cautions in the 2 races. We saw 2 very tame races at Vegas. Wouldn't be shocked if we kind of see the same thing. Over the last 5 races, drivers that have scored more than 20 Dominator points in those 5 races. Last race last year, we had 4 drivers score over 20 Dominator points. The race last spring had 2. The race before that, we had 3. The race before that, we had 1. And the race before that, we had 3. So probably looking for 2 to 3 Dominators. I will say the race that had 4 people that scored over 20 Dominator points. Some of that came from the back, and some of that came from the back. Sorry, I heard part of being a dad. Heard my son cry, and I instantly thought about that for a second. So yes, anyway, back to those 4 the 4 Dominators that scored over 20 Dominator points last year at this race. Some of those came from the back. So when we're looking at this race in general here, and the optimal for the race that had 4 people scored 20-plus Dominator points. Only 2 of those guys were in there, like Martin Truex Jr. and Joey Logano were in the optimal. Ryan Blaney was in the optimal, and he only scored 9.75 Dominator points. But the fact that, he started 23rd and finished 5th, he outscored some of those guys that had Dominator points that, kind of finished a little bit further back. And he was cheaper. Kevin Harvick he started 3rd, finished 2nd. He scored 23.25 Dominator points. He scored 66 fantasy points, but, Blaney was the optimal play because he was cheaper. He ended up scoring 0.5 more fantasy points. Chase Elliott started 8th and finished 4th. He had 21.5 Dominator points, scored 65 fantasy points, but was not optimal. So, again, when you're building your Dominator lineups, you probably only needed 2 because the optimal only had 2. We're trying to go optimal here. So the race last year, the Las Vegas race, the 3rd race of the season, the Pennzoil 400 in March last year, there was two dominators, Joey Logano and Kevin Harvick. Were your two dominators, and they both were optimal. They both scored over 85 points. So, obviously, you needed those. So, yeah, like when you're looking at it, I think that you're probably playing a two dominator team. Wouldn't be shocked if you play a little bit more, but honestly, I think that you're looking more like a two dominator team. Maybe make a 2 to 3. Really going to depend on like starting positions. So we'll talk about that on the breakdown show Saturday night. Just kind of overall looking at Vegas in general. Kevin Harvick was really good at Vegas last year with this package. So he's obviously a guy that's like standing out right off the bat, but I was kind of already looking this morning at like the steep tracks from just last year, just alone, and just trying to get an idea of what we're gonna kind of just be looking at, and we look back at like those 8 races. Truex won a couple of those races, Kyle Busch won a couple of those races, but like Kevin Harvick was really, really strong. But your like leading DraftKings guy was Martin Truex Jr. and Kyle Busch. Your leading FanDuel guy was Kyle Busch. So, just kind of looking back at those races, what's interesting, like in those 8 races, like nobody had 8 top 10s in those races. Harvick had 6. Kyle Busch had 6. They were the most. But like Kyle Busch, man, you look at it, his average finish was 5.9 on steep tracks last year. So like he is obviously right up towards the top. So heading into the weekend, depending on like the speed, and there's so much that can change, just in general, that we'll have to really just kind of be paying attention and breaking everything down, which we'll be doing on Saturday's driver breakdown show. So that's kind of it. We don't do too much previewing. We do a lot more recapping on these shows. So looking at those winning lineups, nothing really crazy about the winning lineups from this past weekend. So we'll have so much more to talk about like next week when we get off of these, when we get off of Super Speedway and we move on to a 1.5 mile track like Vegas. So that's going to wrap it up here for the Morning Grind podcast and the recap preview show for NASCAR. Like I said, we'll be back talking some hockey tomorrow on the podcast. Appreciate everyone listening. Not even just like my normal sign off, doesn't really apply here because like there's no contest to kind of play. Maybe there's something you can play. So hope everyone enjoys the All-Star break, and we'll be back talking hockey tomorrow.